Say hello to. The TurboGrafx-16 was one of those consoles poised for greatness that just stumbled due to circumstance. Wedged in between the Nintendo juggernaut and Sega's technologically more impressive Genesis, few gamers were enticed by NEC's machine. Of course, this only applies to the West. Travel to its homeland and it's a very different story. After developing tech for a couple of consoles as a third party, NEC wanted its own piece of the gaming pie. So they put together the PC Engine, an extremely efficient 3-chip machine that just happened to be way more powerful than both the Famicom and the Sega Mark III. And it ushered in the 4th generation of gaming. It still stands as the smallest first-party console ever released. By using credit card-shaped games developed by Hudson as its media, they were able to reduce the size of the console by a huge margin. Of course, its compact frame didn't come without a cost. It only has one controller port. Regardless, it did pretty well for itself at first, but truly took off following the release of the CD add-on a year later. This was the first time any console had access to that media, and the difference in storage space is massive. CDs were also cheaper to manufacture than ROM cards, so developers could not only fit more content onto each game, but they could also produce them for less money. It was a good deal, especially when the RPG was in its heyday there, meaning they could fit much longer and more involved stories, complete with cutscenes and large character portraits. Developers loved it, gamers liked it, and the Famicom was actually losing much of its audience to it. Naturally, given the hit that they had on their hands, NEC decided to go west, and things didn't quite work out as intended. NEC didn't have luck on their side when they brought the Turbo to the States in 1989. First off, because of Nintendo's legendarily strict licensing practices, many of the best third-party titles for the PC Engine couldn't make the jump to America. After all, if you're Konami and can only develop on one console, you're gonna do it on the one that's selling like fire. Even so, there were quality games on the console to market. But the packing was pretty mediocre. Compare Keep Courage to Ultra Beast on the also brand new Genesis, and you can see why gamers were apathetic. While these were somewhat beyond NEC's control, two major screw-ups on their part helped doom the console. First, it was as expensive as the Genesis, and the CD add-on was basically the same price as the console initially, effectively doubling the price, bragging out to about $400 US. 1989, that's a lot! Just for the defining feature of the machine. NEC also only marketed the thing in major metropolitan areas. It was an effective tactic in Japan, where everything is super condensed, but not in the US. Another more minor issue was NEC marketing the system as a 16-bit console. It actually had an 8-bit processor along with a 16-bit graphics processor, and the opposition was quick to point out that fact, despite meaning actually very little. All this made the machine a joke in the eyes of most gamers. Even drastic price drops, massive bundles, and a combo unit with a CD drive built in weren't enough to save the machine by the time the SNES got to market. The Turbo was all but dead here in 1993. In Japan, where it was much more popular, it was supported until 1994 when NEC released the underpowered and ill-fated PCFX. It's a shame, as the PC Engine might have had some life left in it too there. Before you even look at hardware, you need to ask yourself if you're up to importing PC Engine games, and if you really want that CD drive. If you grew up with the console and just want to enjoy HuCard games, then the basic Turbo will suffice and is reasonably cheap. It uses the familiar RF setup, the same AC adapter as the Master System in Genesis 1, and a unique controller. A special note, this controller only works with the American TurboGrafx-16. not any other version of the hardware. It's a hardy console, so there's a little risk of getting a dead one. If you do want to get into the input scene or really want to play CD games, then you'll really want to get different hardware. The US Turbo CD add-on is expensive and breaks really easily, so it's not ideal. Rather, I suggest getting a Japanese PC Engine Duo, like this one. An American Turbo Duo will also get the job done, but they tend to be a little more expensive and prone to failure. While it won't be compatible with American HuCards without a mod, you'll be able to enjoy Japanese HuCards along with both American and Japanese CD games, as long as you have the proper system card. All models are compatible with CD-ROM 2 discs, while some require an extra system card for Super CD-ROMs. All consoles require the arcade system card to run the arcade CD-ROMs, as you might expect. And as such, the arcade card is rare, expensive, and sought after by turbo enthusiasts. Fortunately, there were only a small handful of games in this format, and most of them were fighters. This particular model has Super CD support built in, for your information. It uses an AV cord similar to the Genesis 1 in the Master System, although they aren't compatible with one another for whatever reason. I have no idea where you'll get a replacement for that, or its AC adapter, so make sure you get one. It also uses a controller like this, and while it's uncommon, it's replaceable. The downside is this model runs roughly $300, so make sure you're committed before proceeding. The TurboTap, or PC Engine equivalent, is required for multiplayer. An extension cable is recommended due to the short controller cords. There are 6-button controllers out there for the PC Engine, which is recommended for the few fighters that are available. There's also the arcade system card I mentioned before if you're really hardcore into the fighting scene and want to play those types of games. A good number of the best TurboGrafx-16 games are available on the Wii Virtual Console, and for a fraction of the going price of the actual disc too. It's easily the best way for casual gamers to experience the splendor of the TG16. there's actually quite a big collector's market for the TurboGrafx-16, as well as it being the import console of choice for most. There are many gems to unearth both domestically and across the Pacific. It's not cheap, but it's a cool underrated console to pick up if you're interested.